Good morning, children. Today we are going to see first lesson in history: how, when, and where. Before we enter into this chapter, let's recall some points which you have learnt in your previous years. Actually, you have learnt ancient Indian history in 6th standard and medieval Indian history in 7th standard, right? This year in 8th standard, we are going to study about modern Indian history. Okay, what is history? History is the study of past events. History is certainly about changes that occur over time. It is about finding out how things were in the past and how things have changed. Right? So, history studies about how present has been formed from the past. For example, we can say about transport system, even communication, education system, even food habits, etc. So, history studies about how present has been formed from the past, and also we study about the past life of people, and we come to know about the reigns of various kings, how they ruled their kingdom and their failures, their achievements and their conquests. And also it gives us an idea about the state of art, literature, culture and civilization. Okay, see, if you take any incident, immediately you ask yourself some questions. When did it happen? Where did it happen? Right? Then how did it happen? You may ask yourself, right? But if you get answers, then you will get a clear idea, right? So, this kind of questions are answered in history. For this, historians need dates to give us clear picture, right? So, now let's discuss about how important are dates. Okay. Before we discuss about how important are dates, let me ask you a question. Who is known as the father of history? Herodotus. Herodotus is known as the father of history. Actually, Herodotus was an ancient Greek historian. Okay, he was the first historian to collect the systematically document events and create an account. So, Herodotus is known as the father of history. Okay, fine. Now, let's discuss how important are dates. You know, dates in history are just like a skeletal system in our body. You imagine without skeletal system how our body would be? Of course, it would be shapeless, right? Likewise, a collection of historical facts would be one meaningless head unless the events were arranged in the sequence of their dates of occurrence. Simply we can say historical events should be coherent. So, dates in history are just like a skeletal system in our body. Okay. Then dates are very important because they tell us when an event was held. Then they form the backbone of information in history. And also without dates, information would be useless here. Already we have seen, right? Then dates help us to understand the relation of events in a time frames. And dates tell about the events, kings and their policies and battles which occurred at a particular time. Then the year a king was crowned, the year he married, the year he had a child, the year he fought a particular battle, the year he died, etc. So, We discussed about how important are dates. Yes, history is associated with dates. Okay, fine. Nowadays, historians write about a host of other issues and other questions also. They look at how people earned their livelihood, what they produced and ate, how cities developed and markets came up, how kingdoms were formed and new ideas spread, and how cultures and society changed. So nowadays historians are focusing these criteria also. Okay. How do we determine that a particular set of dates is important? The dates we select, the dates around which we compare our story of the past. Okay, then they became important because we focus on a particular set of events as important. So in this way, we determine that a particular set of dates is important. Actually, in the histories written by British historians in India, the rule of each Governor General was important. These histories began with the rule of the first Governor General Warren Hastings and ended with the last Viceroy Lord Mountbatten, who was the first Governor General of India, Warren Hastings, and last Viceroy of India, Lord Mountbatten. We will see about this later. Okay, then I'll show you some pictures and I'll explain you. See here, he is James Rennell. He was a British geographer. Actually, James Rennell is known as the father of Indian geography. Who is known as the father of Indian geography? James Rennell. James Rennell did extensive survey work for the East India Company in India. James Rennell was asked by Robert Clive to produce maps of Hindustan. An enthusiastic supporter of British conquest of India. Who was an enthusiastic supporter of British conquest of India? Robert Clive. And who asked whom to produce maps of Hindustan? Robert Clive asked James Rennell to produce maps of Hindustan. Rennell saw preparation of maps as essential to the process of domination. So, in the year 1782, first map produced by James Rennell. The map Hindustan was produced by James Rennell in which year? 1782. We will see the map. Okay. See this map? A map of Hindustan produced by James Rennell in the year 1782. Actually, an 18th century map of British India depicting the Indian subcontinent, the Arabian Sea, parts of the Indian Ocean and parts of South and Southeast Asia. Then it covers territories of modern day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Myanmar, parts of Thailand and Malaysia and parts of the Tibetan Plateau to the north. Okay, actually why I showed you the map, British East India Company tried to establish their power all over India. So they prepared maps for their trade expansion and to establish their power on revenue. Finally they succeeded, right? During end of the 18th century, histories that revolve around the life of British Governor Generals, the activities of Governor Generals. There was no space for Indians. So now let us see about how do we periodize. Okay. See, in 1817, James Mill, a Scottish economist and a political philosopher, published a massive 3-volume book, A History of British India. A History of British India was published by whom? James Mill. In which year? In 1817. In this, he divided Indian history into 3 periods. James Mill divided Indian history into three periods on the basis of religion. He called the ancient period Hindu period because most of the India was then under the control of Hindu rulers. Likewise, he called the medieval period Muslim period and the modern period British or Christian period. And also, Mill thought that all Asian societies were at a lower level of civilization than Europe. According to his telling of history, before the British came to India, Hindu and Muslim despots ruled the country. Religious intolerance, caste taboos, and superstitious practices dominated social life. British rule, Mill felt, could civilize India. What did Mill feel? James Mill felt British rule could civilize India. To do this, it was necessary to introduce European manners, arts, institutions and laws in India. James Mill in fact suggested that the British should conquer all the territories in India to ensure the enlightenment and happiness of the Indian people. So, J.S. Mill wanted to introduce westernization. So, he suggested that the British should conquer all the territories in India. For India was not capable of progress without British help. What did he think? He thought that India was not capable of progress without British help. These statements was given by whom? James Mill, J.S. Mill. See, moving away from the British classification, historians have usually divided Indian history into ancient, medieval and modern. This division too has its problems. Actually, it is a periodization that is borrowed from the West, where the modern period was associated with the growth of all the forces of modernity, science, reason, democracy, liberty and equality. Medieval was a term used to describe a society where these features of modern society did not exist. Yes, in this more medieval society, these characteristics did not exist. Actually, why these classification of ancient, medieval and modern also too has its problems? Because this periodization has been followed from the West, already we have seen. It is difficult for us to accept this characterization of the modern period. Here it's worth mentioning that Indians did not have equality, freedom or liberty under the British rule. Of course, the Britishers treated us as a slave. There is no equality, there was no freedom, there was no liberty. Right? So, the country also lacked economic growth and progress in that period. So, yeah, we have known very well they came for trade. Finally, they forced us to cultivate the crops which they needed. So, the country also lacked economic growth and progress in that period. So, it is therefore many historians refer to modern period as colonial period. Many historians didn't accept that this is modern history because there is no westernization characteristics not there. They didn't exist in this period. We didn't have that equality, freedom, liberty and all. In fact, the country also lacked economic growth and progress. So, many historians refer to modern period as colonial period. Moreover, the British projected the called Hindu and Muslim periods as the Dark Ages. How did they project these Hindu and Muslim periods as the Dark Ages? They thought that the British rule would take India towards enlightenment. This was also a wrong notion. Yes, of course. Now, let's discuss about what is colonial. Actually, colonization is a process in which one country subjugates another and thus brings political, economic, social and cultural changes. Here, what is meant by subjugation? Subjugation means gaining control over a country. See, in the Mughal Empire declined rapidly after Aurangzeb's death in 1707. Many independent kingdoms came into existence in India. The British began to colonize India in the mid 18th century. This marked the beginning of the modern period in India. Actually, by the end of the 18th century, the British colonized large parts of India through wars and policies of treachery. What is meant by treachery? It means betrayal of trust. Okay. Children, do you remember who was the first Governor General of India? Warren Hastings was the first Governor General of India. Okay. Now we will see what sources do historians use in writing about last 250 years of Indian history. One important source is the official records of the British administration. So what was the important source? Official records of the British administration. The British believed that the act of writing was important. What did they believe? The British believed that the act of writing was very important. Every instruction, plan, policy decision, agreement, investigation had to be clearly written up. Once this was done, things could be properly studied and debated. This conviction produced an administrative culture of memos, noting and reports. Okay. The British also felt that all important documents and letters needed to be carefully preserved. They thought that the important documents and letters needed to be carefully preserved. So, they set up record rooms and attached to all administrative institutions. Now, we will see what were the administrative institutions. The village Tahsildar's office, the collectorate, the commissioner's office, the provincial secretariats, the law courts all had their record rooms. And specialized institutions like archives and museums were also established to preserve important documents. What were the two important institutions were established by the Britishers? The two important specialized institutions like archives and museums. Then letters and memos that moved from one branch of the administration to another in the early years of the 19th century can still be read in the archives. Yes, if we go to Chennai archives, we can read these early 19th century's letters and memos. Okay, then in the early years of the 19th century, these documents were carefully copied out and beautifully written by calligraphists. Who is known as calligraphists? Calligraphists are those who specialized in the art of beautiful writing. So who is known as calligraphists? Beautifully written by, those who specialized in the art of beautiful writing. So, those who specialized in the art of beautiful writing is known as calligraphists. Okay. By the middle of the 19th century, with the spread of printing, multiple copies of these records were printed as proceedings of each government department. Okay. Now, let us see the National Archives of India come up in the 1920s. Okay. See, the National Archives of India came up in the year 1920s. When New Delhi was built, the National Museum and the National Archives were both located close to the Viceregal Palace. This location reflects the importance these institutions had in British imagination. Okay. Now let us see how did surveys become important under the colonial administration. Actually, the Britishers gave much importance to the practice of surveying because they thought that a country had to be properly known before it could be effectively administered. Therefore, they carried out detailed surveys by the early 19th century in order to map the entire country. For that, they appointed surveyors to take a survey. First, they conducted revenue surveys in villages. Then, they made efforts to know the topography, the soil quality, the flora, the fauna, the local histories, and the cropping pattern. Then, they also introduced census operations held every 10 years from the end of the 19th century. Still, it is going on. They prepared detailed records of the number of people in all the provinces of India, noting information on caste, religion and occupation. So, the British also carried on several other surveys such as botanical surveys, zoological surveys, archaeological surveys, anthropological surveys, forest surveys, etc. We will see the picture about botanical surveys, zoological surveys, archaeological surveys. Okay. In this way, they gathered all the facts that were essential for administering a country. We will see the pictures of surveys. Okay. See here the different types of surveys which were carried by Britishers during the 19th century. Okay, census, then botanical surveys, then archaeological surveys, zoological surveys, anthropological surveys, then forest surveys. Okay, fine. See, the official records do not tell about the needs of people of India. Actually, many official records hide the truth and only show one aspect of the event. For that, we need to look elsewhere. So, the historians use the diaries of people, accounts of pilgrims and travelers, and autobiographies of important personalities and popular booklets that were sold in the local bazaars. Okay, then as printing spread, newspapers were also published. So the historians also use these newspapers as a source. But all these sources, however, produced by those who were literate. From this, we will not be able to understand how history was experienced and lived by the tribals and the peasants, the workers in the mines or the poor on the streets. Getting to know their lives is a more difficult task. So, with this we will conclude this chapter. Thank you.